The Mount Rushmore question is a very interesting one for whatever subject you kind of give it to it. You know, it's very subjective and it really shows someone's perspective on, as I said, whatever kind of sport or film or any kind of subject that they kind of have this opinion on. So in today's video, I want to do my own kind of Mount Rushmore video, but with a kind of twist. So I'm going to do like my WWE / all-time one, and then also do one for NXT, AEW and TNA, and kind of my reasons why I choose them. And they're pretty obvious. I feel like, you know, nothing would be relatively shocking maybe, but yeah, I thought it'd be a really fun video to make for the start of the year and kind of just get into the swing of things as far as videos go for the new year. So yeah, I'm Leo, this is Wrestling Retrospective, and here are my Mount Rushmores for wrestling. So first off, we have WWE, and for me, the first person on this list is Hulk Hogan. I mean, you can't do this list without him. Ideally, wrestling wouldn't be what it is today without him. You know, though there are more than a lot of controversial things about him, and him as a character and as a person, and everything we know about him in WCW and all that kind of stuff, you know, he is on the greatest of all time list. And as I said, wrestling doesn't become the phenomenon it is today without him and kind of what he did for the industry and kind of getting it to that incredibly popular state that then capitalized upon for many years to come. So yeah, for me, as I said, very typical pick, but yeah, you can't do this list without Hogan. Next, Stone Cold Steve Austin, a similar-ish pick to Hogan. You know, Stone Cold made WWE incredibly popular during the Attitude Era, and yeah, he made it cool to be a wrestling fan, which is something that we haven't quite been able to garner again, in my opinion, or at least not in the UK. Maybe in America it's cool to be a wrestling fan, but over here it's very niche kind of thing. So yeah, for me, again, very typical pick, but yeah, WWE and wrestling as a whole doesn't get to where it is today without a Stone Cold Steve Austin, which is why he's just absolutely has to be in this list, ideally. The Undertaker, I mean, he's the GOAT. He's the best character that has ever been, and he's probably the most recognizable behind maybe The Rock, but then that's more because of Hollywood than it is wrestling. Whereas the Undertaker is probably, for wrestling alone, as I said, is the most recognizable character, wrestler, superstar, whatever you want to say. And yeah, like, even the people who don't even know or like wrestling know who the Undertaker is. They recognize where the gong comes from in memes and videos on TikTok and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's like, you know, he kept kayfabe alive for so long and all that kind of stuff, and no one kind of has anything negative to say about the Undertaker. Therefore, like, he's 100% has to be on this list. And my fourth and final pick is John Cena, and I know that might piss a lot of people off, you know, leaving the likes of Shawn Michaels, Triple H, The Rock, you know, all these big names off the list. But for me, for someone who is also grew up in the era of John Cena, I do kind of have that biased with him. But yeah, I mean, he has made it one of the more recognizable things. He's known all around the world, and like, his Hollywood career hasn't exactly made big massive films like The Rock's. So he's still very much recognized for just wrestling alone. And yeah, I said we don't get WWE into the mainstream in the early 2010s and the late 2000s without John Cena. So that's why he makes this list for me, because I say WWE doesn't really get to the heights it gets to without him. Next up, we have AEW, where for me, this list starts off with Chris Jericho, arguably the biggest signing in AEW's history. And though people have grown to increasingly dislike him more and get more frustrated with what he's doing on TV, he's definitely brought the people towards AEW, making it like one of the more popular things, especially in the late 2000s into the 2020s. And yeah, for me, there is no Mount Rushmore list for AEW without Chris Jericho. So yeah, I mean, again, pretty simple pick, but yeah, Chris Jericho has to be on this list. Next up, we've got Hangman Adam Page. That he's the definition for me of AEW homegrown talent. I know he did stuff in Ring of Honor. I think he did stuff in New Japan as well that I haven't seen. But you know, you have your pillars in AEW, you have the people that they kind of have who they use as a backbone, but for me, Hangman Page is Mr. AEW. Like, I'd say more than Omega, more than the Bucks, more than Darby Allin, more than MJF. You know, I don't think anyone has benefited from the creation of AEW more than Hangman Adam Page. And yeah, he's just been one of the most consistent people within the company. And yeah, I said, for me, he 100% makes this. He was like the second person I put onto this list behind my third pick, which was Jon Moxley. For me, he's the backbone of AEW. You know, if they need someone on short notice to do anything, they call Moxley. They need a world champion because, you know, some guy called Phil has gone rogue. They call Moxley. And yeah, for me, like, there is no AEW without Jon Moxley. He's been just the guy for them for so long now that, yeah, like I said, you can't have this list without him. I know and I'm going to say that a lot during this video, but yeah, for me, hands down, Jon Moxley is the backbone of AEW, and as much as Jericho brought the people in, Moxley keeps the people around, in my opinion. And yeah, it's just been fantastic to see like the resurgence of him from Dean Ambrose to Jon Moxley and what he's done in AEW. And for me, though it might be controversial and it's probably not the pick people would expect, my fourth pick is Orange Cassidy for AEW. I feel like it's someone who I would probably label as Mr. Reliability for AEW. You know, no matter what's going on in the company, they know that Orange can put on a great match if he needs to. Though he's like not used, like doesn't normally do it, but has been more recently. Cutting promos he's great at. Just working all 3 shows if he has to. You know, wrestling night after night after night for them. And yeah, I think it's that I know that like anyone like that will probably end up being a world champion. Whether they put the world title on Orange, I don't know. It would make sense for them. But yeah, for me, there's kind of no Orange without AEW, and you can kind of tell by the way that he just throws everything in for this company. And I know like we're kind of getting that storyline at the minute with the whole Death Riders thing, but yeah, for me, he 100% makes this list. As I said, I know you could have Darby Allin, you could have MJF, you could have Kenny Omega, but for me, the person I almost immediately associate AEW with is Orange Cassidy, and that's why he makes this list for me. Following that, we have NXT, and my first pick for them is Sami Zayn. For me, Sami Zayn was Mr. NXT before being Mr. NXT was a thing. You know, he as well as Neville kind of put NXT on the map. And yeah, we're having like kind of new alternative within WWE. It was like having a wrestling show. It was kind of weird. Like Raw and SmackDown were great, but they were mid at the time. And if you wanted to watch some proper good wrestling, you go and watch NXT and watch Sami Zayn and Neville and Kevin Owens and all that kind of stuff when they were first coming through. And yeah, it's just, he helped it eventually go from developmental brand to C brand, even though he was in the very, very early makings of it. His matches with Nakamura, with Kevin Owens, kind of helped it establish as like, if they were having weekends where NXT would be the night before a Raw or SmackDown pay-per-view, the NXT show would usually blow the main roster out of the water, and that started, in my opinion, with Sami Zayn. My next pick is Finn Balor. The guy was literally synonymous with NXT. I think he was the first person to actually have 2 stints down there when he had his original run, and then went back in 2019, I believe, or 20. I know he was there during the pandemic. And yeah, I mean, like, he had classic matches with the likes of Samoa Joe, Kevin Owens, and then Gargano and Adam Cole. And yeah, for me, I say there is no NXT without Finn Balor, so that's why he makes this list for me. And speaking of, Johnny Gargano is my third pick for this, and yeah, he is literally, I think at one point, known as the heart and soul of NXT, you know, saying that he actually wouldn't leave NXT and would never go to the main roster. Obviously things changed and he actually is on the main roster now, but yeah, he's the first Grand Slam champion. He was pretty much the forefront of when NXT hit its peak in the late 2010s with the likes of, you know, on having classic matches with the likes of, you know, Aleister Black, Adam Cole, Andrade, and of course Tommaso Ciampa, who quite easily could have made this list but doesn't. And yeah, as I say, you can't talk about the history of NXT without talking about Johnny Wrestling, the Rebel Heart. And yeah, just he probably was at one point the most consistent guy in the company as far as classic matches go. was one of the reasons why NXT were absolutely outdoing the main roster at points. And yeah, as I said, you cannot do NXT without Johnny Gargano. And my fourth pick, though maybe controversial, is Bron Breakker. Now I know that, like, you know, you're missing off Ciampa, Undisputed Era don't make it, Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, you know, you kind of those people who kind of make the list. But for me, when NXT was rebranded as 2.0 with all the colours and all the ridiculous stuff that I didn't really like that much, I actually stopped watching NXT at that point because I really didn't like it. It seemed like NXT kind of took a step in the wrong direction. It kind of became lost, and though at the minute and now it's gone way back to where it was beforehand in the late 2010s when it was really good. For me, the biggest success of NXT 2.0 was Bron Breakker. And, you know, we see him now becoming the Intercontinental Champion, absolutely dominating people, like with the likes of Sheamus, Ludwig Kaiser, just to name a few, Sami Zayn, Jey Uso. Really, like, getting to a point where he's going to definitely be a future world champion. We knew that anyway. But yeah, for me, if that rebrand wouldn't have happened, I'm not sure how stuff would have worked out for him. He probably would have been fine, to be fair. But yeah, just with that rebrand and how it worked out, I feel like he definitely would make a Mount Rushmore list for NXT. And last but certainly not least, we have TNA. My first pick for them is Jeff Jarrett, and very simply put, there is literally no TNA without the Jarretts. And yes, over time he maybe became too much involved, but for me he is synonymous with TNA and kind of helped it become the kind of, I wouldn't say the phenomenon it is now, but he helped it become kind of one of the most consistent wrestling companies in the world. And, you know, I know he's done like things that aren't great, you know, no one mentioned Global Force Wrestling, but yeah, for me, he's not Mr. TNA because that's somebody else on this list. But yeah, when I think of TNA, one of the first people that comes to mind is Jeff Jarrett, and that's why he kind of makes this list. Sting is the next one. I mean, talk about synonymous. Literally the first person that comes to mind when I think of TNA, and when I see the logo, when I see the logo, when I hear the words TNA, I think of Sting. And I know he's like, you know, not probably one of the best, but for me, in a world where WWE was the destination to go to, he chose to go to TNA. And yeah, he just became kind of the beacon for them. And they kind of, along with my next pick, TNA doesn't become what it is now without Sting. And yeah, I say for me, synonymous with the company. My third pick is Kurt Angle. Like, without him, without the wrestling machine, there is no TNA. And it doesn't become as big as it is today, or at least as kind of big it is today. I feel like there was bigger times in the early 2000s where it was probably bigger, but you understand what I'm trying to say. And yeah, arguably the biggest signing they've ever had, and it helped them incredibly when he debuted for them. I know he wasn't in the best of places, but as he said he's arguably had some of the best matches of his career in TNA, and he helped them leaps and bounds to get to kind of the solidified state of where they were going to stick around for a long time. And even though it seemed like there were times where they weren't going to, you know, you pretty much can't think of TNA history without Kurt Angle. And my last pick, and you cannot have TNA without him, is AJ Styles. You know, he's as close to a homegrown talent for TNA as you're possibly going to get. For me, he's TNA through and through, even when he's not there. And even though, like, when he left, it was on the best terms. For me, there is no doubt that AJ Styles is Mr. TNA. It's how he pretty much got himself to where he is now. He became the accomplished wrestler that he is. I know that he did bits in WCW and stuff, but you know, if you're probably looking at prime AJ Styles, you're looking at TNA. And yeah, you know, you cannot think of TNA history without the phenomenal one. So there you go, there are my Mount Rushmore choices for WWE, TNA, NXT and AEW. For me, I know that there's an incredible lack of women on these lists. I think if I were to have a women's Mount Rushmore as an overall thing, for me, I know it's very WWE orientated, and you'll probably do another video just on women within the companies as a whole. But I think I'd probably go for like a Becky Lynch, Lita, Trish, and maybe Rhea. I know Rhea's kind of a controversial pick, but I'm incredibly recently biased. But you think about Rhea has literally come from the bottom of NXT UK to the top of being women's world champion on the main roster, so I feel like you can't really not have her on the list. But yeah, do comment down below who you would have on your Mount Rushmores for each company, or just in general of all time type thing. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Do leave this one a like, and do subscribe if you enjoyed this kind of video. A lot of stuff coming in January, so I mean, if there hasn't, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff already, but obviously coming up to the Royal Rumble, there's a lot of Royal Rumble type content still to come out as well. So yeah, I hope you're all enjoying what's to come and what's already been, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.